Welcome to Catalyze, the Connected Leaders Academy virtual conference designed to reshape your vision of transformation. As we navigate the evolving business landscape, our speakers will unveil innovative strategies to manage and initiate change. Prepare to adapt, innovate, and lead, ensuring your role as a catalyst in this transformative era.
The word potential denotes the ability or capacity to become or develop into something more in the future. But before we can begin to unlock our true potential, we have to go back to the beginning, a starting point, a place where we're on the same page, on the same level, on equal footing, of the same mindset. And the beginning of this story starts with a number. And that number is 29,200. And I want you to do something with this number. I want you to think it in your mind, 29,200. I want you to picture or visualize it floating in the air, 29,200. I want you to whisper it in an audible tone, 29,200. Say it in your normal voice, 29,200. Yell it and fill the space, 29,200. Write it on a piece of paper, write it in a book, journal it, etch it in your mind. Now we're going to put it to the side for a moment, and I'm going to share a story. Welcome, my beautiful humans. Now, being human is beautiful. And it's beautiful because we got up this morning and we sat up in our beds and we put our feet on the floor and we were able to be here today and enjoy our days. Being human is beautiful because we get to experience the full spectrum of beauty in nature, from the air to the sky to the water to the ground beneath our feet, the leaves on the trees. Being human is beautiful because we're able to create things, and we're also able to create life. Being human is beautiful because we're able to experience the full range of emotions in our day-to-day experiences. And if we're lucky, we're able to experience the highest frequency, which is love. And that could be love for our intimate partner. That could be love for our family, maybe our friends, maybe our children, our pets. And if we're really good, we might even start to experience love for other people and other life in general in this universe that we are currently existing in. And for some people, this is the experience that they have on a regular basis. It would be beautiful if we could just live in this space all the time. But we have one complexity that we have to add to that statement that I made earlier. Being human is beautiful, but it's also complex. Now, what makes it complex? People can talk about their jobs. They can talk about having to put food on the table, having to raise children, maybe take care of the pets, maybe taking our kids to extracurricular activities. The challenges of everyday life. We are coexisting in what we would call a VUCA world. And when I say VUCA, that means that the world is volatile sometimes. Sometimes things explode. The world is uncertain sometimes. Sometimes we don't know what's going to happen. It just happens, and we have to kind of adapt and roll with the punches, if you will. It's complex. Things are very complicated. It's not just simplified in life anymore. There are 8 billion people on this planet. And it's ambiguous. It's ambiguous. And for a majority of human beings, we experience life just like this in this VUCA world, day in and day out. Then comes 2020, and we have what's called a global pandemic. And this is not really about the pandemic, but the pandemic did do a couple things for us that are important to note in this story. One of the things the pandemic did was that it put the entire globe on pause. on pause. Everything just stopped. But in that pausing, in that stopping, we as a species, we as human beings got to see some things. All of us did. And those things that we got to see, we can't unsee. We got to see some international conflicts, wars between nations. Wars between nations have already existed. The pandemic didn't cause that, but it helped us see it. We got to see all the political polarization globally, not just in the United States, but in many countries. We saw the social inequities right front and center on a platter, and we saw economic crises on a global level. There's something else that the pandemic did. And when people started reflecting on where they were in their life at the moment, they realized they were wearing masks. And so they took off the proverbial mask. And when they took off the proverbial mask, some things got exposed, like all the self doubt, all the hopelessness that some people carry, the burnout, maybe the lack of self care, the loneliness, the depression, the disconnection with society, and those who felt unfulfilled in life. Interesting. Let's come back to that number again. What is it? 29,200. The first time I learned that number was through a man. His name was Richard Leiter, and he wrote a book about the power of purpose. He's one of the foremost business coaches on purpose, and certainly has written lots of books in this area and been doing a lot of research in this area. And he said, Paul, what's 29,200 mean to you? And I didn't know at the time. And he shared with me. He said 29,200 is the number of days in the average life expectancy of a human being. Oh, that's interesting. What do you feel right now? I'm feeling a little bit unfulfilled in my life. I'm feeling like there's something that's missing. Wow. Well, how long have you lived, Paul? Let's do some life math. Take your age, multiply it by 365, and you're going to get a number. Then subtract that number from 29,200, and that will be the number of average days you have left to see the sunrise and see the sunset. And you're feeling unfulfilled. How many days do you have left? So I did the math, and I was 46 at the time, and I came up with a number. And I was like, wow, these are all the days that I have left potentially. Obviously, I want to live a little longer than that. Do I want to live the rest of my life feeling unfulfilled? The answer to that question should be obvious. Absolutely not. Right? But what are we going to do with that? Then he asked me a second question. What are the two most important days in your life? Now, obviously, there's a lot of research around this, and certainly people will answer, oh, the day that I met my spouse and got married, or the day that I fell in love, or the day that my children were born, or the day that I bought my first house, or the day that I graduated from high school or college, or all these different things. But when you start looking at the research, none of those things wouldn't have happened. Well, none of those things would have happened had you not been born. And of course, now I've seen the math, so I immediately said the day that you're born. But what's the second most important day in a human being's life? And the answer might surprise you, because it's not the day that you die, and it's not all those other things. It actually becomes the day that you figure out why. Who am I? And why am I here? And what's purpose got to do with all that? So every human being fundamentally has that question. Unfortunately, we don't always come to that question at the same time. Some of us come to those questions as youth. Who am I and why am I here? Some of us find it in our 20s. Some get that answer or get those questions in the 30s. Most people, however, don't come to that realization or that epiphany until they get close to the end of life. And guess what? That's a little bit too late. So what are we supposed to do with our time? Well, I did the math because I wanted to bring the point home very quickly. We got to do something. We got to change something. And so we start thinking about what human beings want to do when they ask that question, when they start this journey of self-discovery. What are they trying to do? Well, there's a science to that, and there's ancient wisdom to it. So I'm going to talk about the science of that, which is self-actualization, and then ancient wisdom, which is really about self-mastery or enlightenment. Self-actualization. It's the highest need that every human being has and that they desire to achieve. And it really is a willingness to persistently try to improve oneself and engage in the pursuit of personally relevant and meaningful objectives that lead to a rich and enjoyable life, i.e., the pursuit of happiness. So basically, I'm trying to accomplish living my best life. The problem that we have is if you think about human needs, most human beings are living in scarcity and in fear because they're not able to have all their needs met. It's hard to self actualize when you're still trying to put food on the table or pay the bills or put clothing on people, right? When you don't have those needs met, you can't actually move towards self actualization. But what we do need to understand is that self actualization is an ongoing and dynamic process. So, ongoing dynamic process, pursuit of happiness. Right? When we think about ancient wisdom, I want to lean on a 6th century BC Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu. And he's noted for saying a quote, knowing others is intelligence, knowing yourself is true wisdom, mastering others is strength, and mastering yourself, well, but mastering yourself is true power. It's a pretty powerful statement. Mastering yourself is true power. That's self mastery. That's enlightenment. But what is the word enlightenment? What does that really mean? When you think about it from a spiritual sense, it's described as a spiritual state in which an individual transcends both desire and suffering to attain nirvana. That sounds like something that's way up here in the sky, and it's only reserved for monks, prophets, sages, and wisdom teachers of the past. There are 8 billion people on the planet. Who has the time to sit in a cave and meditate for the next 40 days or 40 years? It seems too mystical. It seems intangible. But is that the only way to look at enlightenment? What if we look at enlightenment as an education or an awareness that brings about change and the spread of knowledge? That sounds pretty attainable and practical. I might be able to actually do that. So, what would happen if you add this ongoing process, this journey, if you will, with the education and awareness that brings about change and the spread of knowledge? Well, you'd have something that's called practical enlightenment. But I want to kind of reterm that as becoming human 2.0. Now, becoming human 2.0 is not about the integration with man and machine and making a part of our bodies part of the technology. That's easy enough to do. We can put technology in people and help people see that they've never been able to see before, hear they've never been able to hear before, or use limbs or access limbs that they've never had access to. That's great. But if we rely on technology too much, we may not even achieve our greatest achievement, which is being human and reaching our full potential. So becoming human 2.0 is really about how do we maximize, reach our true potential. And what's that process look like? There's a blueprint for it, of course. It has to be. Well, how do we make it attainable? So let's do the blueprint. Let's have some strategies. We might even want to implement some rituals, which are intentional routines that help us align to what we really want. And so let's talk about these strategies and how they can inform us or help us become human 2.0 and maximize or reach our true potential. This first strategy is about knowing thyself. Well, there's a Latin for that, nosce tipsum, or temet nosce, depends on which form of Latin you want to use. But knowing thyself is about doing that deep inner work, kind of analyzing our individual desires and our motives and our thoughts, our emotions, understanding what our gifts, our values, our passions are, uncovering our purpose, and understanding that our fundamental purpose for every human being is really about growing and giving, but your calling is how you get there, right? So every human being has a need to grow and give. That's the purpose. Grow ourselves, give to others. But your calling is how you go about doing that. Knowing thyself. That's the fundamental step. And from there, everything else must align with your purpose. Because if you're living in purpose, you can then extend that number, the number of days you live, because you have a reason to live. You have a will to live. You can extend it. And there's science behind that. But what's even more important, or I'll say kind of anecdotal, but it is important, is that when you're living in purpose, living on purpose, the work you do becomes love in physical form, because you're also working in your purpose. So know thyself, very important. Second strategy is to regulate to elevate. Well, what does that mean? Well, regulate is having an understanding of our emotional states, right? So there's an awareness about where we are emotionally. And then the second part of that is being able to manage that, right? Well, here's the problem we have in most of our society. Most people don't even have the emotional vocabulary to describe and assess how they feel in the moment. For the most part, we're either good or we're bad. But what does that mean? What's good exactly? So we have to, one, increase our emotional vocabulary and be able to recognize when we're having an emotional experience, are we reacting to our environment or are we responding to our environment? Is the emotion driving us or is the emotion informing us? Right? Once we have that awareness, we got to have the ability to manage that. And if you can't manage yourself, it's really hard to manage other people. So you got to start there first. You got to have a way to regulate yourself. And when you regulate yourself and you're able to start responding to your environment versus reacting to your environment, you can elevate your entire human experience. So you got to have practices for that. Many things that we can do there. We can meditate. We can have a coherent practice. We can use vagal toning. There's lots of tools out there to help us do this. But we got to be able to regulate to elevate first. Second. Third strategy is about finding our focus and flow. So focus is about where we direct our attention, intentionally direct our attention. And then we do the things that create the environment for our brains to operate at its peak, whether that's memory, whether that's cognition. But we're really trying to get our state into an optimal state of cognitive performance so that we can get into what's called the flow state. And when we're in the flow state, we're able to create, we're able to have the insights, we're able to respond to our environment in the moment very, very quickly, selflessly, timelessly, effortlessly, with a richness that helps us enjoy the experience to the utmost. Fourth strategy is about minding your body. What do I mean by minding your body? Well, when we have experiences, we kind of stay in our head and we kind of think that this is the experience that we're having in our head, but we don't actually attach the body to the entire experience. And when we have an entire human experience, there are things going on in the body. And we have to start to get in tune with that somatically. So, what do I mean by somatically? When something happens in the body, in the brain then signals to the rest of the body how to respond. But if we're not in tune to that, we don't know what drives us to do the things that we would typically do in our environment. And so that's more about getting in touch with the mind and the body so that when we're having experiences, we know what that is doing to us physically. And so in order to kind of hone that skill, we have to do practices that connect the mind and the body. For example, yoga is a great practice if you're using yoga not only for the physical movement piece, but also for the energetic connection piece to the body. A qigong is another type of practice that not only connects to the physicality of the body, but also to the emotional and the energetic experience that's in the movement as well. A fifth strategy is to nourish and heal the body. And that's about how we utilize our environment, having an understanding of what is going to help our bodies, one, feel energized, and revitalize and repair. And so nutrition is not just about eating food, but it's about eating the right food that is for us as the human being, not just following the guidelines that might be written somewhere in some document somewhere, but really understanding how nutrients and the environment and our genomics or genetics kind of play a part in our being able to maintain health, and how we interact with disease and how that relates to our ability to perform. Another strategy for us to look at is upgrading human interactions. Every experience we have with another human being is called an interpersonal experience. And some of those experiences are good, some of those experiences are bad, right? Or not pleasant. It's how we communicate, it's how we treat one another, it's how we show up. What do we want the relationships to look like? Whether it's personal, whether it's professional, whether it's intimate. And if we create psychological safety, we give ourselves the opportunity to create the space to allow us to interact, collaborate, build trust and connection with other human beings. And really the last strategy I want to share here is connect and live consciously. We're living in this universal experience with other human beings, 8 billion people, plus we're interacting with the planet and animals and plant life and all these different things. And when we're in discord, that's when we have imbalance and incoherence in our environment. And so if we're able to cultivate a love or a gratitude or compassion for other life, other living things, universally, we are going to have a better, more effective experience in the human experience. Now, those strategies that I shared, those are things that we have to integrate as practices. So now we have a choice. You can take the blue pill. You can wake up in your bed tomorrow and you can believe whatever it is you want to believe, or you can take the red pill. You can stay in Wonderland and you can see how deep the rabbit hole goes, because now that you've seen it, now that you've heard it, you can't ignore it. So you got a choice. What's the number? 29,200. Are you doing everything you can to be the best version of yourself right now? If not, you can start your journey today. And I'll go out with this because Danny Z said this earlier. Don't let your yesterdays define your tomorrow. Thank you. My name is Paul McFadden. My company is Evolve Human Potential. I look forward to seeing you in this human experience.
Thank you for participating in today's enlightening session of Catalyze. As we transition to our next expert, remember that each strategy and insight is a step toward becoming a transformative leader in your field. Visit connectedleadersacademy.com to stay engaged and informed. The journey of change is ongoing. Let's move forward together.